Hey, what's up? Hello, Super Simps, and welcome back to another episode of SimplyPodLogical, a Simply Now Logical podcast.
It's back.
It's back.
We're back.
Today's episode is brought to you by a box of clothes in the trunk of my car. You could buy them for the low cost of $5,000 and try to sell them to your friends, but you probably won't make money that way. You'll probably just have to trick more people into joining my clothes selling box out of my car business. Check it out at the link down below.
There's no link
There's
of
no
such. Yes.
Christine,
welcome back, everyone. Happy Taco Tuesday.
Taco Tuesday. Christine and I just watched a documentary on Amazon Prime. Is that what they call their streaming service? There's too many of these now.
I can't keep track.
I'm not happy about it.
Multi-level streaming services.
Okay, so we just watched a documentary called LuLaRich about the clothing company Lularoe. That is
Not Lululemon.
No, Lularoe. That's a pretty bad name.
It was named after her kids or something. Lula, or I forget their names.
Should have picked better name for your kids.
Okay, that's enough.
Did Lululemon already exist when they named the company?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
I wonder if that played into it. Anyway, so Lularoe is a clothing company that is a multi-level marketing structured business.
They sell mostly leggings, but they also are known for like maxi skirts and dresses and women's clothes.
And the allegation or accusation is that they are a pyramid scheme. There is currently like ongoing litigation about this. A lot of people have lost a lot of money being involved in their business, and they do still exist.
Yeah.
Which is kind of shocking.
I looked them up after. The comments are not good on their Instagram.
Yeah,
put it that way.
Their Yelp reviews probably aren't very positive. So a lot of people are talking about them right now because of this Amazon documentary. It was like 4 episodes, an hour each, so it's like 4 hours. If you don't have time to watch that, or you don't have that streaming service, there was a Vice documentary about them.
It's on YouTube, I think.
Yeah. You can watch it for free on YouTube back in 2019. And it includes a lot of the same people, a lot of the same interviews, interviews with a lot of the same people, I should say. The only thing I thought the doc really added was it gave you a bit of the history of the company, and it had access to the 2 people that started the business, the husband and wife team.
And it had deposition interviews, right? That wasn't in the Vice documentary.
Good point.
So from the court proceedings
that
happened later.
I feel like you could take away most of what you need to take away from the story from the Vice doc, to be honest. You're just missing the sort of the perspective of the founders, the husband and wife team, who are, I would say, not exactly giving honest answers necessarily. Like they're cutting between the answers they're giving the interviewers and their depositions that are just contradictory, let's say.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's explain a bit of the situation. We'll give our thoughts on it. We just thought it was really interesting. We just want to talk about something we watched the other day.
And people also have asked me in the past, like, what are my opinions on MLMs? So that's why we think this is an interesting topic. We are not experts. We are not economists, obviously, in marketing or specialists in that sense. But yeah, we're just like people on the internet, and people kind of want to know how we feel about them. And I think it's a good opportunity to teach some people who maybe aren't really aware of what that means, because sometimes you come across a company that sells makeup and you think it's cool and you don't fully appreciate what the MLM term means or its implications, and you just like hear that and don't know. So we're also taking this opportunity to maybe there's people who don't know.
All right, so just to very briefly define terms so we can have this conversation, what is an MLM?
Multi-level menchie.
I pulled up the definition from the Competition Bureau in Canada. But I think just like very generally speaking, a lot of people sort of mix up the terms MLMs and pyramid schemes. Because an MLM can be a pyramid scheme, but there also are legitimate ways of running MLM businesses too.
Legal ways.
Yes. Yeah, maybe not.
So they're not all illegal. An MLM is not necessarily illegal.
Yeah, so in Canada, an MLM is a plan in which participants receive compensation for the supply of a product to another participant, who in turn receives compensation for the supply of the same or another product to another participant of the plan. So there has to be, it's multi-level. There has to be like levels to this. You have people selling the product to lower levels of people who are selling it to people on a lower level than them who are ultimately selling it to a public or consumer base outside of your plan, let's say.
And this has been around for decades, right? If you remember the Avon ladies from 20 years ago, that's the same kind of structure, right? So like I remember Avon consultants growing up. My parents had friends who were Avon consultants, and I didn't really learn about this until when I was much older. But there's a lot of companies, especially in cosmetics and makeup and women's goods, which we'll get into kind of why
it's
later.
Not a coincidence these things appeal to women, and I would say even specifically
middle-aged women,
stay-at-home mom kind of profile of women. I remember it with Tupperware.
Tupperware parties.
Like,
did you go to them?
I don't think my mother was involved, but I think I had friends whose mothers did that.
We'll discuss later if we have any personal experience.
Okay, gotcha. So what makes something a pyramid scheme as opposed to just an MLM is, or how should I put this? An MLM can be legitimate or legal. It can be legal under the law in Canada.
Or the US.
But in Canada, pyramid schemes are illegal. And what would make an MLM plan a pyramid scheme is if it meets one or more of the following features. There's 4 of them. One is that it requires payment for the right to receive compensation for recruiting others into the plan. 2, it requires purchases as a condition of participation, with some caveats. 3, it includes inventory loading. Or 4, it lacks a buyback guarantee on reasonable commercial terms or participants are not informed about the guarantee. To really sort of just bring this to like the essential thing, like the too long didn't read, usually people say pyramid schemes are things where the compensation is not for the selling of the product. Really what you are being compensated for is just enticing or getting bonuses for recruiting more people into the program.
Yeah.
And I think that is the core allegation and the most damning thing about the LuLaRoe business model is that you had 0.01% of people making like 70% of the money. They were overwhelmingly making that money through bonuses of recruiting other people, and almost no one was making money actually selling product.
Well, it changed over time. I think in the beginning, more people were making money selling product, but as the company grows bigger, recruitment was pushed more. And so more people saw the incentive to recruit more. I'll make more money this way. And that was just kind of the model that the business was pushing.
Yeah, and this isn't an excuse, but like that business grew incredibly quickly. And so I just don't think they really knew what they were doing. And they all of a sudden found themselves basically running allegedly a pyramid scheme.
Right, because it was now more focused on recruiting as the main source of income rather than product. Although product still existed. Yeah. So I think that was one way they were trying to say, no, we're legal. We sell product through to consumer, right? Because that's what the guy in the doc, the
is
co-owner.
A defense. Yeah. And they've made changes over time to sort of reduce their liability.
They changed their refund or their guarantee policy after a few years in business to try and let's make sure we have some policies in place.
They literally had training videos trying to defend why they weren't a pyramid scheme. And they're
they literally
using
said
those terms.
We need to get away from being a pyramid scheme and do this instead. Those were their words that was recorded.
Was it literally that? Because I think we need to be careful
Something
of
like
our
that.
own liability.
Okay, but they use the words getting away or
Yes.
something to that effect and the word pyramid scheme as if to suggest, let's make sure we're not this.
And their main defense was, people are being compensated for the selling of product. And I think they changed their model over time so it wasn't bonuses explicitly just for recruiting other people. It had to be aligned or tied to the actual selling of product.
Yes.
Do you want to talk
about...
about...
But then when they did that, all their consultants and trainers and all the different levels made significantly less money.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So
Yes.
once they were doing it that is more compliant with the law, everyone was making less money. And obviously that was not, in what they thought in their interest because they'd already made a whole bunch of investments in the clothes and needed to make money back, whether through bonuses or selling the product through. And all of a sudden it was harder.
Yeah. So like you already said,
It's hard to run a legitimate business, I suppose.
Yeah, imagine that. So like you already said, we're not here to give like a legal or business
No.
take on it. I think we're mostly interested in, you know, the people who participate in it. I thought the documentary focused a lot on the founders, and we should talk a little bit about them because they are interesting characters. But I think I'm more interested in the angle of who are the people who get involved in these things, how should we feel about them? And I feel like that wasn't really explored in this documentary in a way I would have liked.
There was a little bit of that, like just in one episode, I remember them talking about how one of the women felt like she was in a really vulnerable situation with her finances or, you know, the number of kids she had, and felt like this was the opportunity pitched to her to change her life. And it's pretty clear to me that MLMs often capitalize on the vulnerabilities of, especially but not always women, but that seems to be a hot target, because stay-at-home moms or women who have a period where they're not in an active career because they're parenting or whatever, are looking for opportunities or ways to bring in money to the household. They want to feel like they contribute, and I totally get that. Yeah. And the easiest way, the perceived easiest way to do this is when you're on Facebook scrolling and someone says, want to make money at home for your family. And then some of the taglines they use is like family first, work part-time for full-time pay. And they use all these phrases like girl boss, women empowerment, run your own business, be that boss for your family, retire your husband. And, you know, all these phrases that are trying to capitalize on feminism, but in my opinion are kind of like a fake feminism, because the underlying root there is really not to empower you as a woman in your own business, because it's not your own business.
Well, I don't think that, if we're talking about LuLaRoe, but I guess we can talk more generally, these companies aren't about empowering these women.
No, they're about empowering the founders.
It's about empowering the profitability of the parent company
and they're using that culture to push that.
And this was maybe the grossest thing they engaged in as a business, among many things, is what they would do is, so they'd get these women involved and they'd really convince them to do a few things, or I think kind of pressure them to do a few things. One of those things was, you know, show off how amazing and successful you are being, spend all your money that you're making buying either more product or like show off your amazing lifestyle, so other women will think like, oh my God, I can make so much money doing this.
That's just social media.
So it's like setting them up as a trap, you know, like buy that Louis Vuitton bag, buy that new truck, and then show all your other mom friends on Facebook how successful you are. But they also like very deliberately wanted to make it a family business. So like the sort of, it's like, get your husband involved in the business. He doesn't need to work. Retire your husband was the word they used, right?
Strange to me.
It's genius in a despicable way, because what it was doing is, for the people who did that and they put all their eggs in that basket, they were dependent on LuLaRoe, on the MLM plan,
and they had to continue taking risks income, like buying more profit or buying more inventory to sell more, or recruiting more people, and their families, like household and like both incomes are at stake because the husband is not participating in the business. The other part I wanted to mention, though, is that I got the impression, just like reading through the lines of a lot of their discourse that they post on social media, was that the retire your husband part of it wasn't, it was in part, yes, to like make the whole family reliant on the business, but it was also because the husband, he's a man, so he must be good at business. He can help you with the business part, and you can just have the fun parties.
Yes, so the version of feminism that they were basically, advancing, like explicitly, they'd have workshops and stuff talking about this sort of thing.
How to make your husband happy.
Yeah, and a lot of it was like, you know, just make your husband happy and he'll take care of you. It's like that sort of. I don't know who calls that feminism, but if it's that sort of version of feminism, and if you call it that.
My favorite quote from the documentary was the co-founder. What's her name? Deanne? She goes, women can be strong, but there's a time where you ought to let the man be your hero.
Yeah.
Like,
is that not true?
Excuse me?
Am I your hero when I get you tea?
It's just like, why is this even a sentence that exists? I don't know. Like, I don't think about relationships in that way. like we're equal partners, and if you choose to go into a partnership of a business with your significant other, that's fine. But like, what are with these assigning of roles based on gender? Let the man be your hero sometimes, ladies. Like, what does that mean? I mean, I know what it means. I don't like it.
It's okay if you're each other's hero.
Exactly. See, that's a better take. Anyways,
more balanced approach.
There was this underlying, like, not really feminism in their under the guise of feminism. In the LuLaRoe
and it's
discourse.
manipulative, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's these vulnerable women wanting to be told they're girl bosses or whatever term we're using.
And that
for that
is
now.
the crux of the problem, and that is why so many hundreds of thousands, I think, women ended up participating, wanting to be onboarded. That's why there was queues. They called it like the LuLaRoe queue, where you'd spend 6 weeks waiting to get the call if you would be accepted to be a consultant and pay the $10,000 or whatever onboarding package. Mm-hmm. So you were like getting hyped up on social media that you were in the queue. I can't wait to spend $10,000 to be a girl boss. And you get excited because you're joining the clubs or the Facebook groups, and then they'd have these events where there'd be a raffle. So everyone in the queue could sit at the raffle. They'd fly from around the country, pay for their own plane tickets, and just hope that they get that ticket to get onboarded that day instead of waiting 6 months to pay $10,000.
Yeah, and they'd have at these conventions too. We shouldn't underplay them. So they were making hundreds of millions of dollars through this business.
Who was making? The founders.
LuLaRoe. The company was
the revenues were huge.
Exactly.
Yes.
So there was huge money we're talking about, and they would throw these lavish parties. Mm. They'd invite like Kelly Clarkson or Katy Perry to perform.
Mario Lopez. Remember that?
I don't remember that.
8 years later.
But yeah, like some of the most shocking visuals in the documentary are like these middle-aged women just having the time of their life at like this Katy Perry concert, and meanwhile like they're involved in like in a literal scam where they're probably going to lose all their money.
Because that's what works, and that's what's like the most pathetic, sad thing here is that putting on that kind of show is what works. It's what made those women feel like this is the best job of my life. Look at all the perks I get. Who wouldn't want to live my life? Now I'm going to go sell it to others.
So I want to get into like the psychology of the people participating in this, because I think that's what wasn't really done in this doc in a way I was happy with, because they really position it as these founders are the bad people who tricked vulnerable women. And there's definitely some truth to that. But I am more inclined to think that these women sort of knew what the deal was. They saw that they were making way more money by just getting other people involved in this than selling actual clothes. Mm-hmm. I think this idea that these women are all just victims, I think the truth is way grayer than that. And a lot of them were active participants in perpetuating this scam and getting other women or other people involved in this losing proposition. And I feel like no one was really held to account for that.
Yeah, in terms of lawsuits, you're right. It doesn't look like it.
Not even about lawsuits. Like that we're interviewing women who made a lot of money on this, and they're talking about like how they eventually realized I was basically in a cult or it was a scheme but like, hey, like you were actively participating in this, and some of them made a lot of money off of, victimizing people way lower on the in the plan than them, let's say.
I know what you mean, and I think it's not fair just to call every single woman who was ever onboarded a victim. Like that's not it either. I do think there was one interviewee who seemed to express some remorse over what the lives she might have ruined of others, and I think that was just like her just deciding to say that. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right. Like the director wasn't necessarily prompting questions to ask these women that, and that might be because they don't want to upset them, or that wasn't the direction they wanted for the doc. But I think it's important to consider that. I also think, though, that it is possible that some of these women didn't see it, and I'm not trying to just make excuses for them, but when you are sold an idea of empowerment and that you are empowering others, and when everything is good and you have a surplus and you're getting those bonus checks, you don't really think about the harms that might be happening to people underneath you. because you think it's good, and you're just maybe you don't have the business expertise to really assess the whole situation and think like what could be problematic, or in the long term, how could this go wrong? Or maybe you can, but you're in denial because you've been conditioned to think, no, you're good.
So I agree with you. I think there were definitely some people who are just ignorant or in denial, as you say.
Willfully ignorant, I think.
But exactly. And at what point is willful ignorance basically you just pretending you don't realize you're scamming other people?
I think a lot of this is just education. And I think that's the best approach for this.
Is this the solution? If
I
people
think
in
so,
your
yeah.
life are involved in businesses like this, because you're right. It's very easy to just think these are like dumb people being manipulated into doing something, right? But like you're not, if you know.
I don't think it's dumb people. I think it's desperate people. Desperate, sorry, that's just kind of a strong word too. But it's people who really want something really bad, and you give them a life and a culture that looks amazing and looks like in photos, like everything they want. You give them concerts and events. You give them a community, and that's probably the strongest factor.
Sure. And if there are people in your life who have fallen into this,
it's hard to get
the
them
way to
out.
reach them isn't to tell them how stupid they are for falling for it, right?
Exactly. It's not going to work because, in part, just like a cult, the founders will prepare people who were recruited for the haters. They will prepare you and say, there's going to be people in your life who doubt you. There's going to be people who say, you can't do this. You can't win. Don't listen to them. So when you prepare the defense and then a concerned family member comes to someone and says, hey, I'm worried about this. Isn't this an MLM? Yeah, I was told that you were going to doubt me, and then
you just don't
and then
believe
you're not
that I'm
gonna
a
win.
successful businesswoman.
Exactly. So that's one element of a cult. That's what they do, and that's how they continue to succeed in perpetuating. And they can't break through this idea to like the people who are recruited that like something is actually problematic.
Yeah, I couldn't help ignore like the sort of, there's like an analogy to religion for me, or more specifically maybe like the sort of like televangelist thing. So the husband of the, I guess, are we calling the wife the founder? It's a husband and wife team who made the company.
It's not. Well,
it's implied that they are Mormon.
She's the president. He's the CEO. That's what they titled themselves as. I don't really know.
I think they just said that sounds cool. You can be the CEO. Like they basically ran the business together. It seems like he really ran it as a business, and she was the face of it. Let's say. Even when they ask her about like how is the company empowering women, like he'd be like, "Can I answer that?"
He answered it first. He like put his hand around like in front of her and was like, "Can I just jump in here?"
But anyway, so these people are it's, I don't know if they explicitly say, but it's heavily implied they're Mormon. He talks about like Joseph Smith. They have like 17 kids.
He compared himself to Joseph Smith at an event in front of LuLaRoe consultants.
Yeah. Which I think is when some of the women involved in it started to scratch their head and be like, what am I involved in?
I thought we were selling
here?
Leggings.
But he gives off the exact same vibe and energy to me as, have you ever seen those old, I guess they still are on.
Keith Rainier?
The
NXIVM guy.
Not even the NXIVM guy. Like turn on the TV on a Sunday morning in America and you'll find some channels
like
of some preacher.
The church guys.
Who are like, call this hotline to donate some money to us and like God will hear your prayers.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most like despicable, disgusting things.
That's his next move for sure.
They like
he'd crush it.
I basically see him as like interchangeable with that sort of vibe and energy. And when I was thinking about like how do you reach these people who have fallen into this, it's almost like a same mindset of trying to reach someone who is being scammed by some like televangelist preacher.
And they don't want to believe it because they've invested so much in their faith. They don't want to have doubt. And in this case, they've invested so much in the community and culture of LuLaRoe.
Their faith in this is their way to be a successful businesswoman when they probably
but
had
it's
no
also
other
their
path
friends.
To that.
And I think that's another way that LuLaRoe was so initially successful was because they built that community and these women, maybe short of other things fulfilling them in their lives, found each other. And all of a sudden, they didn't want to go against each other. So when you build that community, it's like, like having friends on social media or something, or like having, a bunch of streamers you follow and you love them all. Like you want to participate in that, and to doubt them is like, well, these are my friends. This is my life. This is what I believe in. So it's very hard.
Yeah. But showing them things like the Vice documentary or this Amazon series, maybe that's a way of getting through to some people, to see other women who have gone through it. And, you know,
that would be my advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
If
right.
you have a family member or someone you're concerned about, or you are just curious, what actually is the problem here? Then I would watch some stories from people who've been through the problem and come out from the other side explaining how it's been a detriment to their lives.
And there are like resources for this. Like when I was looking up that definition of like what legally is what is the difference between an MLM and pyramid scheme in Canada? Like the first result is this like PDF from the Competition Bureau of Canada, a government agency that is like clearly designed to be like a warning to people who are considering getting into these businesses. And I think we could maybe do a better job of sort of distributing that sort of material to people who are most at risk of falling into these traps.
The problem is, though, is that it's not easy to make money quickly, especially on the internet.
Imagine that.
Imagine. But everyone wants to make money quickly. So when you are presented with an opportunity to stay at home, work part-time for full-time pay, you know, take care of your kids, and all you got to do is these very specific 8 steps, it's easy and it's made clear to you. It sounds like a no-brainer, as opposed to actually starting your own business where you own the IP and the supply chain and you make the decisions, because there's no clear-cut rules on how to do that. So that's why trying to understand why people do make this decision, because it's a very easy presentation. It's like, here is the menu, 1 through 8. That's all you got to do. Done. Whereas actually starting your own legitimate business where you have the control is not an easy step-by-step process.
So what's the difference between a legitimate business and what these people were doing? Again, the main one is that you're making money just off recruiting more people than actually selling product. But I think we should point out some important things, like these women would just get shipments of leggings. They wouldn't even know what they're getting. No. They would get, like, at one point the quality was getting worse and worse. And there's nothing they can do about that, right? And people were getting packages of leggings that were like soaking wet and stunk, to the point where like one of the categories on the website for like people with CX complaints was about the smell of the product. And I think the speculation in one of these docs, one of the pieces, was that they grew so fast that they had to start storing stuff outside, maybe. So
it got rained on.
It just got soaking wet if it rained, and moldy.
Allegedly, yes.
Allegedly. Just absolutely. And the patterns. Okay, so basically they were just pumping out these shitty, like, I don't think we should, we haven't acknowledged that, how awful the product seemed, right?
The leggings were so ugly. Yeah.
So these absolutely hideous leggings for the most part. I feel bad for the designers who got involved in this company, because I guess they were just given these quotas of like, pump out as many designs as you can. A lot of them were just like stealing other existing designs off of the internet and changing them a little bit. But it's all just like gross, like it doesn't look good. And the material and the quality of the product
went down.
At one point it might have been okay, but there were clips of people like at the end, I don't know how it is now, but they would like hold the leggings and just like gently pull them, and they would just rip apart like incredibly easily. Like they are not clothes.
What material does that? Like I can't even think.
Yeah, so that's a good sign you're not involved in a legitimate business. But that's a huge
concern, because you put up $10,000 in inventory. Yeah. You don't know what you're getting in terms of quality. I think you were allowed to pick like the sizes or something. But you don't know the print, and that was part of the marketing, is that you don't know the print. It's different every time, so they're always limited edition prints. So you better get it now, like when it comes to selling it. Also, another model we're not entirely fans of, if that's their only model, because you could never get the same piece again.
Good point. And there are like clips of these like sessions they'd have online, these like meetings where you would have like the founders, the husband and wife on.
Motivation calls.
Yeah. And so he's like, I'm hearing a lot of complaints about the product being stale. It's not the product that's stale. You're stale.
It's you.
Your customers are stale. You're the problem.
I think that's a sign too of that it's not your business, because if someone else above you is telling you if you're not making the sales or you're not getting things done, you're just not working hard enough.
Well,
Whose business is this?
well, I mean, if it is your own business, it is kind of entirely up to you.
Yeah, but it's on you. It's not someone else dictating this to you at the top and having quotas that you need to meet.
But it plays into this idea that they're trying to convince you that it's your business and it's all up to you and you're the one responsible for your success or not.
You're right. It's part of the fallacy,
I
suppose. Yeah.
Have you ever, we kind of alluded at the beginning, we knew people who did like Tupperware parties or things like that.
Yeah.
Do you have any more specific anecdotes about?
I do, yeah. And I feel bad because there have been people in my life in the past when I was like a teenager and I didn't know anything about this who absolutely were head deep in MLMs, probably more than a consultant level. I think they were kind of high up. I knew someone who worked in a cosmetics related MLM and they would host parties and my parents and their friends would go to them. And there was more than that. And I think it's related to, in my own personal experience, the suburban housewife existence. That's how I grew up. And a lot of moms where I grew up didn't have jobs. It was just the husband who worked. This was in like the suburbs of the greater Toronto area. And I witnessed for sure cosmetics MLMs participants and subsequent parties, Tupperware ones, candlelight parties. Remember that?
No, what is?
Okay.
It's selling candles?
Same kind of thing, but it's selling candles. I don't even remember the company name, but it was the same model. And then even after that, I had a family member who got involved in selling of a protein powder MLM. And I was old enough at this point to recognize that because I Googled it, the name of the brand, and read about it. And I was like, fuck, this is not good. And then that family member was selling their product to another family member who was much older and more vulnerable and felt bad and was just like, I'll buy it because the first family member needed to sell through product and they were guilting my other family member to buy it. And that's when I really learned about MLMs, when I started like researching it, because I'm like, something is fucked up here. Yeah. And I was trying to warn my older family member, but they're, you know, they're vulnerable and they just like, they bought it. And then I tried to tell the seller family member and they didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, that's a tough situation. It's hard. Yeah. To know what to do there. And actually, so that's a good example about how this isn't just all about vulnerable women, for example, because in the sports nutrition space, let's say, I think that's where you have more men sort of getting into these types of schemes. And actually my only personal experience with anything close to this is that it's when we were seeing a trainer some years ago, when you were first getting into weightlifting, I had just sort of casually mentioned to the guy, like, oh, I'm a bit of a health kick. I was like, I wanted to start like taking some supplements, multivitamins, things like that. Even though like most people, like, you probably don't need most of what you're getting out of a multivitamin unless you're like low on vitamin D or something specific like that, right? Anyway, I'm not going to go on a rant about supplements, but he sort of casually mentioned like, oh, hey, like I'm friends with someone who owns a business that sells like these multivitamins, but they're like better than the ones you get at the grocery store because I think the pitch was like they're from natural sources. Like they get the nutrition straight from in fruits the and vegetables as opposed to the more artificially created multivitamins. I've no idea about the veracity or if there's any truth to that at all. And anyway, so I just sort of very casually like, okay, I'm going to go buy a bottle of multivitamins. I'll buy it from you. So I did. And then I remember like reading the label and there was something on there that made me not want to ever take them. There was something a little strange.
Yeah, you never took them.
I never took. They're still in a drawer downstairs, I think.
We should throw them out, I think.
And then like 3 months later, I get a really weird email from the guy being like, hey, I'm really excited to put in another order for you to do them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I was willing to try like this brand of multivitamins you recommended. And he basically said like, oh, I'm worried about losing you as a client. And I'm like,
it's that manipulative language.
I had no idea what he had thought this was something that I definitely didn't. It was really weird. But yeah, it was absolutely the same thing. And hey, maybe he totally believes in the product. I'm not necessarily thinking he was trying to scam me. But yeah, the feeling of him coming back being like, oh, I thought you would be a customer of mine and you'd stay on it. And the whole thing was pretty gross. Yeah.
So you've purchased a product from a retailer, from a consultant of an MLM, but you were never recruited into an just to make that clear, right? Because
yeah. Because there are people like, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world to buy a product that might be.
People, including people listening to this podcast, might have purchased Lularoe leggings 4 or 5 years ago when its reputation wasn't shit. That doesn't mean you are recruited into an MLM.
It's very different than actually participating in the plan. If that guy had then said, hey, I'll give you a bunch of these bottles so you can sell them to other people.
You would have immediately been like, no.
I know I would have immediately recognized that as a problem, but not everyone would. And it might be the thing where like you totally believe in the product and you're like, that does sound like a great idea. I'd like to make money. So,
but you need to do more research.
Yes.
I've never purchased an item from an MLM. However, I have received them in PR, and I didn't know. So this is a story, and this is why I thank people for politely pointing things out to me when I didn't know. I was sent probably more than one company, but the one that sticks out to me was Unique. It starts with a
Do you want to say the name?
I Googled it. It's very clearly written as an MLM.
Okay.
I mean, we could say allegedly, according to Google, they are an MLM, but I was sent a Unique product by them. I had given them my address. That is a fact. And I posted on my story. This was like a few years ago, just to say thank you, as I do with a bunch of makeup companies send me stuff. And sometimes I choose to post it and say thank you. It doesn't mean I'm not paid to promote it necessarily, unless I've said I'm paid to promote it. I was not paid to promote this. I was just saying thanks. And I had no obligation to do that. But then I got some replies from you guys telling me and warning me that they were allegedly an MLM. So I Googled it and I went back and deleted my stories and made sure to never show them again, because it's not something that I want to promote. But I didn't know. So
that's interesting.
It's like, it's impossible to keep a count on every cosmetics company these days that might fall under that structure, because you don't know unless you have to Google it and research it. So that's the other thing.
But if you're going to promote something, if you're going to even show something on your social media,
that
you should
know
bad.
It's not. Yeah, but like, you're right. I could have Googled it and looked into it a bit more, but I didn't, because just like first glancing at their website or their socials where they initially contacted me from, I think like just looked like they made
you thought you just got gifted something and you were just saying thank you.
Yeah, but and it's my fault, but like that was an interesting learning experience, and I think it shows that when you see someone who maybe is like showing it or buying it, don't come at them with hate, because maybe they don't know or maybe they don't understand yet. I mean, I understand MLMs, but I didn't know that this company was allegedly.
Yeah, I guess there are a lot in the beauty space.
There are a ton, and there's more than I probably even know off the top of my head.
Are there nail polish ones?
There's a...
You don't have to say them specifically. I just want to know about
the biggest one that people ask me to review all the time.
Oh. Still, or like back in the day?
Still.
Interesting.
They make nail strips where you just like, it's like a sticker and you stick them on and kind of folds over. So it's like a nail polish wrap.
Oh.
And they are huge in the States. And fun fact, for like a year ago, I thought it would be really interesting, kind of an experiment and a teachable lesson, if I could join them and uncover what was really going on behind the scenes just through being a retailer or consultant level, and then tell you about it on YouTube. And I thought that would be interesting, but then I couldn't do it because they required too much information about your address, and it had to be US based, and your bank account information in order to sign up, that I was not willing to jeopardize privacy for a company that I knew that I did not ultimately support. But I did want to make that video as like an investigation of sorts to teach people, and it was nail related. I never made that video for a few reasons, and I'm kind of glad in the end
probably a good thing you didn't do that.
But it came on the heels of a bunch of people asking me, these are so cool, you should review this. And I understand, and I thought, well, let me do this, but explain what the problem is with the business model. Yeah. But then I didn't do it.
I think you could explain what the problem is without as interesting as that sounds, I
It
think
would
you
have
can
been more
explain the
interesting.
problem
Like I
without.
actually joined an MLM.
Has anyone? I wonder if someone has done this, like an exposed video, like from inside an MLM.
I'm sure someone has.
I'm guessing there are. I know there's been some creators who've made some really good content that is like thoughtful, critical analysis of these business models. I know Tiffany Ferg has done a bunch.
Yeah.
I think the Financial Diet people have probably talked at length about MLMs and things like this.
There's
legal
tons of
advice, too.
videos on YouTube. You can just Google what is wrong with MLMs. 800 million videos.
Yeah, I bet. So yeah, maybe that's another resource or tool if there are people in your life doing it. Yeah. All right, Simply, is there anything else to say?
Who is still working for Lularoe? I want to know.
Eesh.
There is one girl in the doc who they interviewed who still believes in her mission, which I feel sad
Was
for.
she the joke is, like, if you don't care about the legality or morality of the business, the way to make money in a pyramid scheme is to be one of the early or top people in the pyramid, right? So it's not a complete shock to me that
People at the top are still there.
that some of those people might still be hanging on and being willfully ignorant, maybe.
Because they've made a lot of money.
Yeah, they've actually made money from it. It's like tangible.
Like hundreds of thousands.
You can't
some of
convince them
said,
it's just a scheme when they have been successful,
yeah.
right?
But they're like ignorant to the tens of thousands of women under them who have gone into debt.
But to the extent that even those people at the top are dependent on recruiting new people, I don't know how in 2021 you are signing up to become the lowest level person at a company like LuLaRoe.
The same way people signed up in the beginning, except yes, you're right. Social media reputation should have had more of an impact to guide people away from the LuLaRoe brand specifically.
And that's what's changed, right? Like if you Google LuLaRoe right now, you're going to very quickly find a lot of sources about the problem. Whereas
Yeah.
5 years ago, there may
didn't
not have
know.
been anything to really flag what the problem was.
You're right. So that should absolutely dissuade new people from considering it. There's probably not a 6-week queue anymore,
Probably not.
but it still amazes me. Not that's the wrong word, but like it's sad still that people will, despite all these warnings and stories that people have said, I'm $100,000 in debt because of this business. Don't do it. More people will still join because they believe in themselves. They read the culture, they read the fancy Tumblr looking posts, and they go, that's what I want to aspire to. And it's just really sad when you capitalize on people who are looking for more meaning in their life and you speak to exactly what it is they need and want, and you're essentially pulling at their heartstrings at a weak, vulnerable time in their lives.
Yeah. And maybe having empathy for these people is a better, way of looking at it than just thinking they're dumb, vulnerable women. I know, like, there's such there is a real temptation just to be like, how could you fall for this sort of thing, right? I feel that a bit too.
I think that's fine to think, but I don't think that is the rational way to go about talking someone out of it or talking someone down, because it's not going to help them. They've been conditioned by the cult, by the ideology of the culture, that this is what is right for them, and that there will be people who tell them you won't make it. Just like that NXIVM documentary with that's the same logic they use. I watched another documentary on cults. I can't even remember at some point.
The NXIVM one?
No, there was like another psychology one about cults like NXIVM
Oh, okay.
and just like in general. And I think it really applies to MLMs, especially ones that create a culture or a community of people. In this case, it was like a social media of like a bunch of white women on Facebook, having Katy Perry parties and such. And when you have that culture, it's really hard to deny it because that's where you feel accepted, just like you do at a church or your faith of choice. And to disbelieve in it is to go against the beliefs that we thought you had or you are supposed to have.
There's an important distinction between like getting invested into a subculture or a community of people aligned around a specific interest. But as soon as you introduce like a leader who's like, hey, I got to sleep with all of you.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
a business owner who's like, you sell my product and I'm in control of everything. That's the issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The NXIVM one is interesting. We talked about it on the podcast
Yeah.
briefly, I think. And since we talked about it, there's been some sentencing of those people. So I think there was some concern that he might get away with it. NXIVM was a cult where some like pseudo intellectual guy fooled mostly a bunch of aspiring actors into like joining his community where they thought like he was some genius guy. And then it turned into basically a sex cult at a certain point.
And he would mutilate them and brand them with his initials.
That was the salacious thing there were some
Yeah.
headlines about, because he would literally have these women branded with, was it his initials?
I think it was a combination of
It was
his
some
initials
symbol
and-
that
yeah.
represented him, I think. But yeah, he was only recently sentenced to prison. He got a pretty meaningful sentence out of it. And I think there was some concern that like, if you have people willingly participating in a sex cult, it's not necessarily entirely clear how culpable you can
Yeah.
hold someone
Who
for
is
that.
the victim? Who is the perpetrator when you have multiple levels of compliance and people agreeing? So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I really don't want to conflate an MLM with a criminal
Yes,
scheme
sorry,
where there
yeah.
was like, physical and sexual assault.
Gotcha.
Totally different than a
Yes.
business financial scheme here. But in terms of culture and the participants believing up that there
And
is
just how
someone
they
higher than them,
manipulate
and the
people.
manipulation tactics and the don't believe the haters defense line that they teach you right at the outset,
Yeah.
there are some similarities to keeping you in line.
They're all hallmarks of cult
Mm-hmm.
behavior, right?
Yeah, so stay safe, beware out there.
Well, on that happy note,
There's better leggings. Or wear sweatpants.
click my non-MLM link down below for my favorite tea.
Yeah, if you want Simply's Picks tea, I have a affiliate link.
This probably isn't the episode to
I'm not
include,
recruiting you though. I'm not recruiting you to sell my tea, but I am recruiting you to drink it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a bummer. Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you for joining
I
us.
hope this was helpful. I think people do want to hear about, like, just us speak about it. I think more awareness is good. Not that we are experts, but, you don't need to be experts to just talk about the fact that this exists. And it is especially relevant to my audience's demographic, which is predominantly young women who are on social media.
Yes.
So that's something that I think is really important.
That's a really good point. It's important that they hear this from you way more than me. Just hearing it from other women, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. From a place of caring. I don't want you to ruin your lives in debt. I don't want you to fall into a scheme where you feel like you're growing your own business, but you're really growing someone else's. I don't want you to be coached into debt,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And please don't do that.
Yeah, please don't do that. And yeah.
And starting a business is an actual business is incredibly hard, but incredibly rewarding too, right? And not everyone will have success doing that or the luxury of doing that. But if there was a legitimate get-rich-quick scheme,
everyone
would be doing it. Yeah.
But there's not an easy get rich quick scheme that doesn't come with consequence.
Or it doesn't just involve victimizing other people.
With consequence, whether it's
Yes.
legal consequences or hurting others or huge risks to yourself in the long run. So remember that. All right,
Stay
everyone.
alert and play safe.
Oh, actually, speaking of finances and best practices, I think our next podcast we will have a guest.
We might be having a financial advisor on
Yes.
at some point.
We won't be talking about MLMs, but he's a finance guy, so.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I know we had teased a long time ago we would do that, but yeah, I think we're currently talking about recording it. It might not be the next one, but
Yeah, sorry.
it will be soon.
At some point soon, we're thinking of doing that, and I know
We'll put a
people have
call
kind
out
of-
for questions.
Yeah, we will have a call out for questions, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome.
I
Well,
know you
thank
are
you,
too.
everybody. Hope you enjoy your tacos tonight. And we'll see you next Taco Tuesday.
We'll see y'all later. Bye.
Bye.